Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Glowing star. If you love emotional family drama, shocking betrayals, and powerful revenge stories with unforgettable twists, you're in the right place. Today's story follows Nora, whose own mother empties her apartment while she's celebrating her birthday. But what happens just 1 hour later changes everything. Stay with us until the very end, you won't believe how this story unfolds. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let's get started. Happy birthday, Nora. My coworkers cheered as the candles on the chocolate cake flickered under the restaurant's warm lights. I smiled, closed my eyes, and made the same wish I had made every year since moving out of my mother's house 3 years earlier, that one day my family would finally see me as more than the responsible daughter they could always take advantage of. At 28, I had built a quiet but comfortable life in my own apartment, worked hard as an interior designer, and carefully saved every dollar. My mother, Diane, never approved of my independence. She believed children owed everything to their parents, no matter how unreasonable the demand. Even after I moved out, she still expected me to pay her bills, babysit my younger cousins, and drop everything whenever she called. I had finally started setting boundaries, and she hated it. That evening I ignored the 3 missed calls from her while my friends laughed around the table. Not tonight, I whispered to myself before blowing out the candles. Everyone applauded, and for the first time in months I felt genuinely happy. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. "Nora, are you moving? There are movers taking everything from your apartment." My smile disappeared instantly. I stared at the screen, convinced it had to be a mistake. I replied, "No. I'm at my birthday dinner. Please stop them if you can." Seconds later another message appeared. "They say your mother authorized the move." My heart nearly stopped. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped over. My best friend, Emily, caught my arm. "Nora, what happened?" she asked. I showed her the messages, and her face turned pale. Without another word we rushed out of the restaurant. The 30-minute drive felt endless. I kept calling my mother, but she ignored every call. My imagination raced with terrifying possibilities. Had someone stolen my identity? Had my mother somehow convinced the building manager she had permission? When I finally reached my apartment complex, a large moving truck sat outside with its back door open. My sofa, dining table, television, family photos, and even the plants I had lovingly cared for were stacked inside. 2 movers carried out the last box from my bedroom while another locked the truck. "Stop!" I screamed as I ran toward them. Every head turned. One mover frowned. "Ma'am, your mother said this was an authorized relocation." "She's lying," Nora shouted, tears forming in her eyes. "This is my apartment. I never approved this." The workers looked genuinely confused. They handed her the paperwork. There, under the authorization section, was a forged signature that looked similar to hers but wasn't. Worse, the emergency contact listed was Diane's number. Before Nora could say anything else, a familiar silver SUV pulled into the parking lot. Her mother stepped out calmly, wearing an expensive blazer and sunglasses despite the evening sky. "You're making a scene," Diane said coldly. "I did what was necessary." Nora stared at her in disbelief. "Necessary? You emptied my home on my birthday." Diane crossed her arms without a hint of guilt. "Your brother and his family needed furniture more than you did. You can always buy new things. You're single. You don't need all this space." Nora felt as though the ground disappeared beneath her feet. Everything she had worked for was being handed away without permission. But Diane had no idea that one decision had just triggered consequences she could never have imagined. The parking lot fell silent as Nora stared at her mother, struggling to understand how someone who was supposed to love her could stand there without the slightest sign of regret. Diane folded her arms confidently, convinced she had done nothing wrong. "You're overreacting," she said. Your brother, Kevin, has a wife and 2 children. They needed your furniture more than you do. Family helps family. Nora's hands trembled with anger. Helping family means asking, not stealing, she replied. You forged my signature. You lied to the movers. You broke into my apartment. The moving crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Their supervisor stepped forward and apologized. Ma'am, if this authorization is fake, we were misled. We had no idea. Nora nodded, trying to remain calm. Please don't unload anything until the police arrive. Diane's expression changed instantly. Police? You wouldn't call the police on your own mother. Nora looked her directly in the eyes. You stopped being concerned about family the moment you decided my home belonged to someone else. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived and began questioning everyone involved. Nora showed them her apartment lease, identification, and the messages from her neighbor proving she had been celebrating her birthday while the movers emptied her apartment. Mrs. Alvarez also came downstairs and confirmed that Diane had instructed the movers to hurry because Nora would not be home for several hours. The officers carefully examined the paperwork and immediately noticed inconsistencies in the signature. One officer turned toward Diane. Ma'am, did your daughter give you written permission to remove these belongings? Diane hesitated before saying, I'm her mother. I didn't think I needed permission. The officer replied firmly, actually, you do. These items legally belong to your daughter. At that moment Kevin's family arrived in another vehicle. His wife looked embarrassed while Kevin seemed confused. Mom told us Nora was donating all this furniture because she was moving into a luxury condo, he explained. Nora stared at him in disbelief. I never said that. Kevin looked at his mother. Mom, is that true? Diane avoided his eyes. I simply encouraged her to share what she didn't need. Nora shook her head. She never asked me. She planned this while I was celebrating my birthday. Kevin slowly realized the truth and stepped away from his mother. You lied to us too, he whispered. As the officers continued their investigation, the apartment building manager approached carrying a folder. Nora, he said, our security cameras recorded everything. He explained that Diane had used an old spare key she refused to return after Nora moved out. The cameras also showed Diane instructing the movers to remove every item, including electronics, jewelry boxes, and personal documents. The officers requested the footage immediately. Diane's confidence began to disappear as she realized there was undeniable evidence against her. The moving company supervisor apologized repeatedly and promised to return every item exactly where it belonged. The workers carefully unloaded the truck while Nora watched with a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Every box reminded her that someone she trusted had violated her privacy in the worst possible way. Emily stayed beside her the entire time, offering quiet support. You don't deserve this, she whispered. Nora nodded silently, too exhausted to respond. Just as the last piece of furniture was carried back inside, one of the officers received confirmation from the building manager that the surveillance footage had been copied successfully. He informed Diane that she was being investigated for forgery, unlawful entry, and theft by deception. Diane's face turned pale. She looked at Nora, expecting her daughter to stop the investigation. Instead, Nora calmly said, For years I let you control my life because you were my mother. Tonight that ends. Diane never imagined that the daughter she had always considered easy to manipulate had finally decided to fight back, and the biggest revelation was still waiting to be uncovered. The next morning, Nora sat quietly in her apartment, surrounded by boxes that had been returned only hours earlier. Although every piece of furniture was back in place, nothing felt the same. Her home had been violated, and the person responsible was her own mother. As she looked around, she realized this wasn't just about stolen furniture, it was about years of manipulation, guilt, and emotional control finally reaching a breaking point. She promised herself that this would be the last time anyone treated her like her life belonged to someone else. Later that afternoon, Detective Harris called with an important update. The surveillance footage, forged authorization form, witness statements, and phone records all confirmed that Diane had carefully planned the move several days before Nora's birthday. She had even contacted the moving company herself, pretending to be Nora and claiming she couldn't be present because of work. The detective explained that these actions could lead to serious criminal charges, including forgery, unlawful entry, identity fraud, and attempted theft. Nora thanked him quietly. She never wanted her mother to face criminal consequences, but she knew that allowing the behavior to continue would only make things worse. Meanwhile, Kevin visited Nora alone. The moment she opened the door, he looked ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "Mom told us you had upgraded to a bigger apartment and wanted us to have your old furniture. I believed her without asking you." Nora sighed and invited him inside. After hearing the full story and seeing the evidence, Kevin admitted he had spent years ignoring how manipulative their mother had become. "I should have stood up for you long ago," he confessed. Nora smiled sadly. "You can start now by telling the truth." Kevin nodded without hesitation and later gave a complete statement to the investigators. A week later, the case reached court. Diane expected Nora to withdraw the complaint at the last minute, believing that family loyalty would outweigh justice. Instead, Nora calmly testified about everything that had happened: the forged signature, the unauthorized entry into her apartment, the lies told to the movers, and the years of emotional pressure that led to this moment. The judge listened carefully while reviewing the overwhelming evidence. Diane eventually admitted that she had believed she had the right to decide how Nora's belongings should be used because she was the mother. The courtroom fell silent as the judge responded, "Being a parent does not give you ownership over your adult child's life or property." The court ordered Diane to pay restitution for the damages caused during the move, reimburse Nora for legal expenses, return the spare apartment key immediately, and complete probation under strict conditions. The judge also issued a protective order preventing Diane from entering Nora's property without permission. Diane walked out of the courtroom stunned, finally realizing that her actions had consequences she could not escape. Months passed, and Nora slowly rebuilt her peace. She changed the locks, redecorated her apartment, and filled it with fresh memories instead of painful ones. She received a promotion at work, made new friends, and found happiness without constantly trying to earn her mother's approval. Kevin remained close, and together they worked on repairing their sibling relationship through honesty and mutual respect. On Nora's next birthday, Emily organized a small celebration in the very apartment that had once been emptied. As Nora blew out the candles, she smiled, not because life had become perfect, but because she had finally learned the greatest lesson of all. Real family is built on love, trust, and respect, not fear, guilt, or control. Sometimes the strongest act of love is having the courage to set boundaries, even with the people who raised you. And as the room filled with laughter and applause, Nora realized that losing the illusion of a perfect family had allowed her to find something far more valuable: her freedom, her confidence, and a future that truly belonged to her.